Hey everyone, Dr. Frunkey here with a fun new knife comparison video for you. It's been a little while since I've made a video like this because it's not often that I think two knives necessarily need to be compared anymore. This was an interesting matchup because when the Spyderco Drunken came out, I thought in my head that it looked a whole lot like the Spyderco SpydieChef. Both of these are knives made by the same company with very similar profiles, but very different philosophies and executions. And I think that this video would also help people understand why the Drunken costs $400 and the SpydieChef costs about $200. I think when you could get the SpydieChef, which now is discontinued, it came in somewhere around $215, and right now you can buy the Drunken for about $410. And so this one is roughly double the price of this one, but they look more or less the same, and a lot of people may not understand the major differences between these two knives and what justifies that doubling of a price point. And I wanted to look at these two knives and figure out for myself if I feel like twice the price is justified in this situation. I haven't been able to review the SpydieChef on my channel because I never bought one. It just wasn't quite perfect to me. I like a knife that I can Spydie flick easily. The hole is somewhat obscured on this knife. I've certainly handled quite a few of these. My friends have had them and I've gotten to play with it, but it just, for whatever reason, I didn't get it. And now that I have one in hand and I'm comparing it here, I regret that because this is very close to a perfect pocket knife. Just as with the Kapara, this is in line with Spyderco's philosophy of making excellent tools, and this is probably one of the best pocket knives ever. It just is really that good, and that is because the philosophy is such that you can use this for almost any type of cutting task. Yes, it's called the SpydieChef, and it's intended perhaps for in the kitchen use, but the way that this blade the blade is shaped and the ergonomics of this thing make this super useful. And so I regret not having it, but it was also cool to see that there were similar designs coming out like this one. Now, something else that's really strange, this knife is designed by Marcin Slisch. I don't know how to say his name. The same guy that designed the Spyderco Slisch Bowie. This knife, however, is designed by Dmitry Sinkovich. So two different custom knife designers, custom knife makers, but very similar overall profiles. So on this side, you can really see sort of that the layout is very similar and just very similar knives. And so let's take a look at these knives and get some vital signs on them and see what we're working with. And then we'll break them down and see where the quality comes in on that Drunken. So up front on your SpydieChef, you've got just about 3.5 inches of blade. I'm going to say just under 3. You got about 3.4 inches of blade. To the pivot, you're looking at about 3.9, almost 4 inches to the pivot. And overall length is exactly 8 inches on this guy. The handle is coming in at 4.5 inches with an effective grip area at about 4 inches, just under 4 inches. The Drunken is just a little bit larger right here, coming in with about 3.5 inches of overall blade and cutting length. Pivot is 4 inches and it's still 8 inches of overall length. So what you're getting is actually a slight bit longer cutting edge, at least from heel to tip on the Drunken. But maybe the SpydieChef makes up for that in actual length by having that tip curve up just a little bit more. Interesting little difference there. So there is also a difference in the weight on these two knives. The Drunken comes in with heavily milled titanium and a front scale done in carbon fiber, and the weight comes in at 3.75 ounces. The full titanium SpydieChef comes in at 3.74 ounces right there. Is that exactly the same? 3.75 and 3.74. So the SpydieChef actually still wins out on the weight by 0.01 ounces. So just a hair lighter on the SpydieChef. I was not expecting that at all. I thought there would be a pretty significant difference, but there's not. The Chef somehow feels a little bit more, I don't know how to say, not massive, but just more substantial. For some reason, the Drunken feels lighter than it looks. I don't know. This one, it's hard to describe that. Let's go ahead and break these knives down anatomically. Up front on the chef is this blade done in LC200N. I love this steel. I love these nitrogen steels. I have a Spyderco Mule Team knife in LC200N. It is a joy to sharpen. It's very easy to sharpen. And it maintains an edge quite well, and it's more or less completely corrosion resistant. This knife is basically not going to rust on you if you take care of it at all. You can really abuse this steel and it still won't rust on you, and so most users are going to really enjoy having a quality steel with excellent edge holding properties and almost complete corrosion resistance. On the Drunken, you're going to be getting S90V. S90V is also a super premium steel, also done in essentially a full flat grind. The blade stocks on these guys, you're going to notice there'll be a substantial difference. The Drunken is going to be much thicker, but at 0.138 inches, it's really not that thick. A lot of knives come in at 0.156, and so the SpydieChef is coming here at 118 thousandths, so 0.02 inches thinner. So significantly thinner stock, and it's going to come down to an even finer area behind the edge. This seems to be a number that a lot of people are concerned about nowadays, the thickness of the blade behind the edge. This SpydieChef is incredibly thin at 0.019. That's super thin. That may be one of the thinnest knives I've ever tested. And then here on the Drunken, got to be really careful right there. You're going to get 0.26, 0.25. So the Drunken is coming in a little bit thicker behind the edge. You can see that it's thicker stock and it's a shorter grind. And so it's not going to be quite as thin and slicey as the Chef. But again, slightly different philosophies. You want to have a thin stock and things when you're cutting up foods, apples, tomatoes, other things. It helps to prevent sort of the axe-like phenomenon of ripping through that material, where you really do slice through it much more cleanly. Now, let's go ahead and move back to the pivot. The thing that I like about this is that both knives run on phosphor bronze washers. There are really not any major differences here. These may even be exactly the same washers on these two knives. And I, for one, like that. I like to see the move back towards phosphor bronze washers. I think that ball bearings in the setting of a kitchen knife would have been a mistake, because you're going to use this in dirty situations and you're going to get gunk in your ball bearings. Same thing here. It is designed as a user knife, and I have really enjoyed using this blade and using this knife, and I feel confident that I could use this in pretty much any situation and it would be totally fine. Now, the difference being the internal pocketing on the inside of this, if you were to get this dirty, would require some substantial cleaning on the inside. So let's go ahead and talk about the handles here. This is where you're really going to see the major cost difference. The SpydieChef is essentially just two flat slabs of gray titanium that have been stonewashed. There is very simple milling, a chamfer around the edge and a chamfer at the front. Otherwise, it is very flat. There is no internal milling. There is a simple lock bar. They did put the wire clip on this knife, which is brilliant, and it just makes this knife so exceptional. The thinness, the sliciness, the quality of the materials, and then you throw this pocket clip on it. You know, this really takes a Spyderco to the next level. This is the best clip probably that's out there. They put it on the Capara, and it absolutely stole my heart. And this knife is really no exception. You can see I'm not very good at Spydie flicking this knife. Again, why I never owned the knife. However, the complexity on the Drunken's handle cannot be understated. Overstated. Cannot be overstated. That's the way to say that. Take a look at this front scale in carbon fiber. Beautiful voidless carbon fiber with this incredibly complex Drunken milling pattern. To execute this requires, you can't just plug this into a CNC machine and say go. I mean, you can, but you have to make sure that your tooling is up to the task. You have to have the right machines, the right tools, and the right people to make this happen. It's not really that simple. And then to also replicate that on a titanium scale on the back, then include this larger titanium anodized hardware. Take a look at the internal milling on this knife. Let's see if I can get that to focus. Significant internal pocketing on the titanium side. Check out the jimping on the inner liner there. The carbon fiber side has its own steel liner that has also been pocketed for lightness. There is blue titanium hardware. There's a blue titanium clip, a blue titanium backspacer with an incorporated lanyard loop. Just a significantly more complex knife. This blade also is, I mentioned, an S90V, and it's been finished in a mirror wash finish. That must take a tremendous amount of time to polish S90V and then stonewash it. It is much more time intensive and painful than just machine satin finishing LC200N, which is a much less tough steel. S90V is an incredibly tough steel, and it really is a testament to the production of this knife. Now, even after looking at all these details, people are still not going to understand the difference in these two knives. Why does this knife cost twice as much as this knife? I honestly believe that there's twice as much effort put into this knife as there is into this knife. This is not necessarily an argument of function. The SpydieChef might actually be a more functional knife, but it's not all. We're not always chasing function, pure function, are we? Sometimes we're chasing artistry. Sometimes we're chasing, other like tactical needs. We're not always just chasing pure slicing function. And what I think the Drunken has is a combination of quality, artistry, and also usability that makes it an excellent tool, just like the SpydieChef. I'm not going to say one is better than the other, but I'm just hoping that maybe this video can help justify in some people's minds why the Drunken is a more expensive knife at twice the cost. I cannot, all I get all day when I post videos or pictures about these knives, and I'll bring out the new Paisan as well as a good example, is why do these knives cost so much money? These shouldn't cost this much money. They're made in Taiwan. I hear that a lot. The xenophobia in that comment alone is very troubling. It shouldn't really matter where it's made. It's going to cost what it costs, and trust me, Spyderco is not trying to screw us. Sorry for the language, but Spyderco is one of the most honorable companies out there. Sal and Eric, they're doing it for the guys who love knives. They're not trying to ruin our days by giving us these expensive knives just for profit. These are expensive knives because they're incredibly complex to make. And I'm happy to see Spyderco making this drive towards the higher end. I have certainly gone towards the higher end in my own personal tastes, and so I will be excited to see what Spyderco decides to come up with next. I really, really think that the Drunken was well done. I think the SpydieChef is well done. If you need an excellent tool, find a SpydieChef and buy one. It's worth the $200, absolutely. But I also think if that's worth the $200, this is worth the $400, and this is worth the $525. They're just excellent knives, and they're very well made, and I do think the prices are justified. Let's have a conversation about it down below, and I appreciate you watching my video. Go ahead and click like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Head over to patreon.com/Dr. Frunkey, where you can become a patron, and you might win a chance to own this knife. So thank you guys for watching. And as always, take care.